Pastor Richard Stroud was known throughout Accra not only for his sermons at modern church but also for his notorious reputation as a consummate womanizer. Every Sunday, he strutted onto the pulpit with a smile that could charm even the most skeptical soul and a voice so smooth it made his congregation swoon. Yet behind his carefully curated image of divine authority lay a man who had perfected the art of seduction, and whose secret trysts with his female congregants were the subject of endless gossip in the city. At modern church, Pastor Stroud's sermons were a mix of biblical platitudes and promises of miracles. He often declared, with theatrical gusto, "You are fearfully and wonderfully made," a phrase he seemed to recite as often as he arranged his private deliverance sessions. But while the congregation listened with wide-eyed admiration, the truth was that many of his deliverance sessions ended far from the pulpit, in the privacy of his office or even his opulent apartment, where he would sleep with his victims under the guise of saving their souls. One of the most unfortunate victims of his sleight of hand was Priscilla Addo, a bright and determined woman from one of Accra's bustling neighborhoods. Priscilla had come to modern church in search of hope and healing. Like many others, she believed that Pastor Stroud's touch was imbued with divine power. Little did she know that behind his rehearsed smile lurked a predator more interested in his own pleasures than in her salvation. The scandal was as old as time, but Accra had its own unique flavor of gossip, and none was more active than Nana Kofi, a man whose reputation as the city's most prolific gossiper was rivaled only by the scent of freshly cooked jollof rice wafting through the streets. Nana Kofi could be found at every market stall, tea shop, and roadside corner, spinning tales of Pastor Stroud's escapades with such animated flair that even the most somber listener couldn't help but burst into laughter. "Have you heard about Pastor Stroud?" Nana Kofi would exclaim, waving his hands as if conducting an orchestra of scandal. "They say he sleeps with every woman who fancies him, and then he prays like he's got the keys to heaven. But let me tell you, his miracles end in bedsheets more than in blessings." His booming voice echoed through the lively streets of Accra, and soon his words became the talk of the town. Priscilla, along with 4 other women, Oma, Efua, Abina, and Sawa, had finally had enough of Pastor Stroud's double-dealing ways. For years, they had been his unwilling accomplices in his elaborate game of seduction, each one left with nothing but shattered hopes and an ever-growing list of excuses for why the promised miracles never came. The women decided that if the pastor was going to continue his debauched affairs and fail miserably at his so-called deliverance, then they would expose him in the most spectacularly ridiculous way possible. One sweltering afternoon, when the humid air of Accra mixed with the distant strains of high-life music and the relentless buzz of market chatter, the 5 women gathered in a modest living room near OSU. Their faces, etched with both determination and a wry sense of humor, reflected years of quiet suffering and simmering anger. Oma, the unofficial leader of the group, looked each of them in the eye and declared, "We've been played for far too long. Tonight, we turn his so-called miracles into a comedy that even the heavens will laugh at." They hatched an elaborate plan that was equal parts retribution and farce. They decided to lure Pastor Stroud into one final deliverance session under the pretense of saving a tormented soul. Priscilla, with her tragic backstory and tear-streaked cheeks, would play the lead victim. The others would assume supporting roles to ensure that the event unfolded with all the absurdity they could muster. Earlier that day, Priscilla had sent a heart-wrenching message to Pastor Stroud, filled with desperate pleas for help. "Pastor, I can't sleep," she had written, her words dripping with sorrow and the promise of vulnerability. "A dark spirit haunts my nights, and I beg you to deliver me from this curse." Flattered and ever eager to prove his divine prowess, Pastor Stroud immediately arranged a private session, convinced that he would add yet another feather to his cap of miraculous exploits. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the high-rises of Accra and the neon lights began to flicker on, Pastor Stroud set off in his shiny car, his chest puffed out in self-importance. Dressed in his signature crisp white shirt and meticulously tied tie, he was every bit the picture of sanctified authority. He arrived at a small park near Modern Church, a location carefully chosen by the woman for its symbolic significance and the likelihood of drawing an impromptu crowd. Unbeknownst to him, the park was already abuzz with local vendors selling chilled drinks and the low murmur of curious onlookers who had caught wind of the evening spectacle from Nana Kofi's relentless gossip. Hidden among potted plants and behind the modest kiosk near the entrance were the 5 women. Priscilla stood near the center, her eyes downcast and her expression a perfect mix of sorrow and defiance, while Oma, Efua, Abina, and Sawa positioned themselves at strategic spots, ready to step in when the time was right. As the clock struck 8, Pastor Stroud marched onto the small makeshift stage that had been set up with a borrowed microphone and a portable speaker, an apparatus that, according to local rumor, had a tendency to malfunction at the most inconvenient moments. With an air of theatricality, he began his sermon. "Beloved, tonight we gather to confront the forces of darkness and to embrace the light of salvation," he bellowed, his voice booming over the gathered crowd. "I am here to deliver you from the chains that bind your soul. Tonight, we cast out all that is unholy." The crowd, a motley collection of churchgoers, curious passers-by, and even rival pastors, listened with rapt attention. But as Pastor Stroud continued, the hidden women exchanged knowing glances, each silently counting down the moments until their planned intervention. Just as he reached the crescendo of his sermon, Priscilla stepped forward. With a trembling voice that was equal parts anguish and resolve, she said, "Pastor Stroud, I have been tormented by a darkness that no prayer can dispel. I beg you, deliver me from this curse that haunts my every night." Her words, rehearsed to perfection, sent a ripple of murmurs through the crowd. Pastor Stroud's eyes sparkled with a mixture of self-satisfaction and hidden desire as he reached out to bless her. He moved closer, his hand hovering in the air as if to anoint her with divine oil. At that exact moment, the speakers, already temperamental, emitted a sudden, piercing screech. The sound was so jarringly out of place that even Pastor Stroud paused, his hand mid-air. Before he could regain his composure, Efua stepped forward from behind the potted plant and quipped, "Perhaps the Lord's microphone has something to say about your miracles tonight." Her comment was met with a burst of laughter from the crowd, and even a few of Pastor Stroud's staunch supporters couldn't help but smirk. Undeterred, Pastor Stroud tried to continue, his voice now laced with a hint of irritation. "Silence, my children," he bellowed, "let us continue this sacred act." But just then, the microphone began to pick up stray sounds, a cacophony of distant street chatter and, bizarrely, the faint sound of a polka tune that seemed completely out of place in the solemn setting. Nana Kofi, unable to contain his glee, shouted from his hidden vantage point, "Looks like even the heavens have a taste for polka tonight." The unexpected musical interlude threw the entire event into disarray. Pastor Stroud's face turned a deep shade of crimson as he fumbled with the microphone, trying desperately to silence the absurdity. Meanwhile, the crowd erupted in laughter, the mix of technical glitches and the blatant mismatch between his intended solemnity and the unfolding farce proving too much for many to bear. At this point, Oma and the others had seen their chance. In a perfectly timed moment, while Pastor Stroud was busy arguing with the malfunctioning equipment, Priscilla stepped forward again, this time with an even more dramatic plea. "Oh, Pastor, can you not see that the curse has taken hold? I am but a broken vessel in need of true salvation." Her voice wavered with faint despair, drawing sympathetic gasps from the crowd. It was then that Abina, who had been waiting in the wings, interjected loudly, "Maybe it's not a curse at all, Pastor. Perhaps it's just that your miracles are as empty as your promises." The comment, delivered with perfect comic timing, sent ripples of laughter through the audience. The tension had evaporated, replaced by an atmosphere of uproarious mockery. Desperate to regain control, Pastor Stroud tried one last time to salvage his dignity. I shall deliver you," he stammered, stepping forward with a grand gesture that ended in him accidentally colliding with a strategically placed row of folding chairs. The crash was spectacular, and as he scrambled to his feet, he managed to knock over a stand of decorative flowers that had been arranged by a well-meaning church volunteer. The ensuing chaos was like something out of a slapstick comedy, a flurry of petals, broken chairs, and the pastor's frantic attempts to regain balance. The crowd roared with laughter as Pastor Stroud's face contorted in equal parts fury and embarrassment. Nana Kofi, ever the enthusiastic commentator, shouted, "I've seen smoother sermons in a flea market. This is divine retribution, served with a side of comedy." With the scene descending into complete farce, Pastor Stroud's protest became a jumble of incomprehensible words and clumsy gestures. The technical malfunctions continued, a final, exasperated beep from the speaker and a brief burst of static that accompanied his every word, until he finally, defeated and humiliated, made a hasty retreat. Clutching his dignity as best as he could, he mumbled something about divine timing and miraculous escapes as he fled the stage, leaving behind a stunned and thoroughly entertained audience. In the aftermath of the spectacle, the park buzzed with excited chatter. People couldn't stop laughing as they recounted every moment of the evening: the malfunctioning microphone, the unexpected polka interlude, the accidental collision with chairs, and the final, crumbling image of Pastor Stroud vanishing into the night. For days afterward, videos of the ill-fated deliverance session flooded social media, and Nana Kofi's animated retellings became the gold standard for gossip in Accra. Priscilla Addo, though once a victim of his empty promises, found in that moment a strange empowerment. Along with Oma, Efua, Abina, and Sawa, she had managed to turn her pain into a punchline, a public declaration that the time had come for the truth to be spoken, even if it was through laughter. The women's collective voice became a rallying cry for those who had been exploited by false prophets, a message that even the most pompous of deceivers could be brought down by the power of humor and the unwavering strength of unity. And so, the legend of Pastor Richard Stroud's failed miracle spread through the streets of Accra like wildfire. At tea shops, market stalls, and in the corridors of modern church itself, the story was retold with such gusto that even those who had once admired him began to question his sanctity. The image of a self-assured pastor undone by technical glitches, misplaced flowers, and a cacophony of polka music was too hilarious to ignore. The scandal was no longer just about deceit and exploitation, it had become a moment of cathartic humor for an entire community. In the end, Pastor Stroud's legacy as a smooth-talking seducer who slept with his victims and then tried to pass off his misdeeds as divine miracles was forever tarnished by that fateful, farcical night. While he managed to escape immediate repercussions, the echoes of that evening lived on. Nana Kofi's voice continued to carry the scandal to every corner of Accra, ensuring that whenever someone mentioned miracles at modern church, the laughter that followed would be a reminder that even the most deluded of men could be undone by their own hubris. And so, as the sun set over the bustling city and the neon lights flickered on, Accra remembered the night when truth, humor, and a bit of divine comedy converged to expose a false prophet. In the laughter of everyday people, from the gossip at the market to the jubilant retellings at local tea shops, lay the promise that no matter how deeply deception might be entrenched, it could always be unmasked by a well-timed joke and the resilient spirit of those who refused to be silenced.